We hope to get started here shortly.
And I actually see John is on now, so.
Oh, great. There he is. Hi, John. Glad to see you. I will turn it over to you, John. Actually, just before I do, this is Tina. I'm the session chair. And this is the OLC Live, Forging Meaningful EdTech Partnerships. We have John Stewart, Adam Kroom, Jeremy Dean, Lisa Berry, and Veronica Armour here to present for us today. Thanks. I'll turn it over to you, John.
Thanks, Tina. Sorry, I was running late. I was trying to get logged in. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about forging partnerships between vendors and schools. And this is largely based out of a couple of sessions that happened earlier on in the conference. And so we were wanting to return to those and to just open up those presentations for chatting with the audience. And so I'm joined by Jeremy Dean from Hypothesis, Veronica Armour from Rutgers University, Adam Kroom from the University of Oklahoma, and then, sorry again that I'm running late, but we should also have Lisa from Voicethread, Lisa Berry. And so what I was hoping to do is hand it over first, maybe to Jeremy, just so that you can give us a little bit of a overview of what y'all were talking about in your session the other day, and how y'all were talking about better models, I guess, for building relationships between vendors and their university partners.
Sure, I'm happy to kick it off. Great to be here. Thanks for creating this additional opportunity for us to talk about this topic. This is actually something that Adam and I and others have been talking about over years at OLC, both sort of in the hallways at conferences and blogs and conversations between conferences, and then in a few organized sessions, including one this year called Sympathy for the Devil, or Sympathy for the Vendor, which was based on the Rolling Stones song Sympathy for the Devil. So I've just let a little bit of the allusion there slip. But yeah, it basically comes out of, I'm an academic by training, but find myself in the position of being called a vendor, if not technically being a vendor, and trying to just imagine how to forge relationships, partnerships, that are not based on the way things normally go down at the vendor floor, but outside of that sort of sales space, and think about the relationships between ed tech companies and academic institutions as more about partnerships and collaboration, even if they do involve exchange of money, and trying to, have a conversation about what that looks like. I think it's probably worth hearing from Adam and Veronica about their approaches here, and I'm excited to have another vendor here in Lisa. So that's a little bit of the context. This year we had an exercise. It was not a presentation. It was whatever you call it at OLC. Not a presentation, but something else.
Conversation, not presentation.
Conversation, yeah. And our conversation was largely based on a document around the EdTech Bill of Rights, trying to imagine some basic principles that might guide better, productive, collaborative relationships for vendors and technologists at universities.
Yeah, Veronica, can you tell us a little bit more about that EdTech Bill of Rights and where you got to with the drafting of it?
You mean when we were doing the session? So
yeah.
I think the idea was, to be able to have things that were both of importance to the vendors or the ed tech companies and instructional designers. And I thought it was really interesting to do because I feel like I see both sides of it. Before I became an instructional designer at the university level, I used to do product design or instructional design at a publishing company that does higher ed textbooks. So I was completely in the higher ed division with it. And in seeing how much that we create these, create these products that when you come over to the university side are, and sometimes universally hated or, talked down about, it was really interesting to see the dichotomy between the two. And I found it really interesting how there wasn't more of a unifying feature of like, we both had a lot of the same purposes in mind, at least the people I worked with at Wiley, we had the same goals in mind, and that was caring about the learner. And so it for me, like the Bill of Rights seemed to be able to help us get on the same page with people and start speaking the same vocabulary and ensuring, being able to look at where we were both at.
Lisa, I know you have a background in education as well, having taught for several years. How did you get into sort of working with Voicethread, and how do you try to support that relationship between Voicethread and the faculty and students that y'all work with?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I've been in higher ed my entire career as an administrator and faculty member. And I just happened to have a previous colleague that needed some help. And at that time, I was just looking for a change. VoiceThread has been a tool that I've also then brought into my classroom, and then and there noticed the difference right off the bat. And I think for me, when I'm speaking to a potential client, university or college or what have you, I'm able to share with them the various ways I've used the tool as an instructor. And I hear all the time just the appreciation and in having a greater understanding of what the faculty might be looking for, ease of use, fear of added technology, more on their plate, you know, especially at this time now with learning tool delivery and how that might be shaping how they're going to be working with students this past spring and this upcoming fall. So for me, I think honesty is the cornerstone of, you know, where you're coming from. I'd rather under promise and have the product over deliver. So if you want to add that to your Bill of Rights, I think that's a great expectation.
And that's a great point about sort of under promising and over delivering. Adam, in your session, you had talked about, you know, trying to create spaces where the vendors could listen also and sort of participate in these conferences, but learn what educators need and what they want. How are you thinking about that? And do you think we've made progress towards that over the last couple of years where you've been advocating for that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think sort of the point that I was making is we tend to build up these definitions and boundaries around what is a vendor and what is an attendee, specifically at conferences. And, you know, for better, for worse, they end up sort of being the one space where you get sort of an opportunity to really interact. And I think sometimes there is maybe a misnomer that vendors are only allowed in vendor areas and attendees, you know, are the areas, and there's a separation. And I think because of that, you know, oftentimes conversations that happen, you know, maybe that don't really resonate with the target audience the way that they want to as well. As far as sort of making, you know, headwinds towards having these conversations, I think what we've done is continue to have like this kind of conversation as well, and sort of challenge the notion itself. And I think that's been really helpful. So yeah, I would say there have been, you know, I can't say that I have a specific example of the University of Oklahoma is doing this better partnership than we were since we started having these conversations. I still think there's a lot that we can still challenge about, you know, how does a university partner with a vendor outside of buying licenses and being a customer itself, whether that, you know, I think it's not by chance that a lot of great of the education technology companies come out of institutions that are invented or spun up, you know, like VoiceThread or Flipgrid or Canvas. All of these are sort of products of solutions to problems, you know, at a specific institution as well. And I'm really interested in thinking about the idea of how institutions can help bring value to companies outside of just being customers themselves. So maybe that's another definition that's worth sort of challenging and sort of breaking down of, you know, what is a true partnership versus what is a, you know, customer vendor type relationship.
And to that point, Jeremy, what have y'all learned in your, you know, what, 5 or 6 years now with Hypothesis? How have you been able to learn from your institutional partners? Maybe, you know, outside of conference attendance, how have you been able to talk to them at the schools? How have you been able to participate with them and learn from them?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess 2 ways immediately come to mind. I mean, the first is talking to teachers about how things are going in the classroom, the problems that they're experiencing, but also how the tool has been helpful. And so, you know, being really in conversation with practicing instructors is a key piece of it. The other area is just obviously product. We take our guidance from our users in terms of what's needed. And so I think the product has been very largely guided. Not that we're always doing everything that everybody asks for. Certainly on an individual level, I'm sure there's some folks that want a thing that we haven't been able to get to yet, but largely the product decision making is driven by feedback from faculty or from instructors. And specifically, you know, we have John Udell at Hypothesis, who, and I know you've interacted in this way, John, with my John. You my John too, both Johns. John with an H, John without, I don't know. But we have a labs group, and the labs group works on prototypes and learns from folks like John Stewart, who did I think it was an early version of a kind of like data poll using the API of our product to look at activity in a course. That's helped drive the sort of productization of activity pages. We continue to think about teacher and admin dashboards, and are always getting feedback and really getting early versions of products into the hands of practitioners so that we can get their feedback. So that's one way. Maybe it's kind of obvious, maybe everybody does that, but it's been really very important for us to keep our ear to the street in that way.
And Lisa, same question for you. Have you been able to sort of get feedback from your faculty partners? And then also, have you been able to make space to be able to listen to students and how they're using the product and thinking about them as the sort of end client or end user of Voicethread?
I would probably say more of our communication and feedback comes from the instructors themselves than the students. I think Voicethread is very easy to use, and sometimes while there might be some technical difficulty, you know, for the student with their device or perhaps how the assignment was set up, back to the earlier point from Jeremy, I think that a lot of the feedback from the instructors or even from the admins that set up Voicethread within their LMS environment really helps us drive what our development agenda needs to be. And so through the years, and I've been with Voicethread for the past four and a half, I've seen really cool changes happen and feature upgrades that were really driven by the user. And wouldn't this be nice to have? And, you know, we're looking at maybe this. Fortunately, we've been able to partner with several key institutions to drive some projects to take a look at feasibility with different analytics or other types of beta testing that we wanted to do. So it's been really helpful to have good partners. For me, it's fun because I'm kind of logged into the queue for the integration questions. And it's fun to see our current clients go back and forth with what they need or what they would like. And it just keeps your company growing. We're fortunate to be small and agile and able to move in those directions pretty quickly.
Thanks. Amanda Major in the audience asked how to really work on creating a partnership. When you're launching a project together, do y'all have any advice for fostering that collaborative project launch together from start and incorporating technology all the way into operations and really making sure that it's a value add for the institution, faculty, and students? Maybe Veronica, do you have any experience with that sort of, you know, beginning to end project launch and how to build that partnership?
I feel like I have experience, but experience that I feel is the model of it, not necessarily. I mean, a lot of it comes from who are the people that are going to be using it, and I feel we haven't yet hit that model yet, where in the end, you know, it's the students that are going to be using it. And in any decision that I've seen made when I worked in publishing and now when I, as an instructional designer, see what faculty choose, they don't ever ask the student their perspective. Now, certainly we get feedback from students, we hear what students say, but it seems like the biggest thing we then zero in on is cost and how everything has to be free. And I don't want to sound cynical, I just don't see how that can be possible. You know, we all get paid to do a job, and we can't give things away from free. When we do end up trying to make things free, the burden of who does the labor for free then, you know, and especially with that, you know, that doesn't mean I don't think cost is important, but to have it be the only thing that we kind of listen to the students as their feedback on. What do they want in terms of usability? What do they want in terms of being able to take their data with me? What kind of account or integration do they want to see set up? You know, and with that, and being able to take their information with me. You know, I really like Hypothesis, and from an instructor perspective, I think the integration is really great. But I'm now going to be starting in the fall. Jeremy, I haven't told you this yet, so hey, surprise! I'm going to be starting in the fall a PhD program, and I want to be able to use that for annotating my notes and stuff. But I don't like the idea of two accounts. I'll have my one that goes integrated through Canvas, and then I'll have my personal account. And so how can we make and so I wonder, like, how can we make this more of a tool that is realistic for the student to use, that it's not just what they use for their class, that a lot of these tools are useful to them, like Hypothesis, beyond the classroom in your professional life, you know, with it, that there are a lot of tools that are available like that, that it seems like you have to put on either your student hat or your professional hat, and you can't seem to have those two worlds merged, you know, at all. So I've seen a lot of models, but I don't, until like this, until we stop talking about student being the center, because I think we all think that we're doing the student center, until we actually start having the student be the person we're selling to rather than the faculty member, which faculty members don't hate me on this, you know, I don't think are going to be successful yet, you know, and not that we cut out the faculty, but that we need to make room for the student much more.
I just want to add one.
I was going to
go ahead, John.
You up for something on this, Jeremy, is I know that you've worked with some of our graduate students, and they're sort of bridging that gap between student and professional. Many of them are planning on becoming faculty and continuing to use Hypothesis and other tools like that as they become professional. And so I was going to sort of set you up for that question of how have you worked with students and how have you helped them to make that transition?
Well, I mean, I'll say a couple of things. One, I mean, I absolutely want to hear the voice of the student about the product and their experience. I have for every class that takes Hypothesis in using it in the wild or in the LMS as part of a formal pilot or outside of a formal pilot, we have surveys we'd like to send to students. But of course, you know, at the same time, you don't want, or many times I'd imagine, both faculty and administrators don't want the vendor to be in lots of direct contact with the student. Sometimes that's been made explicit, like, oh, we're happy to have the faculty that are using this tool do this survey, but we're not interested in, we don't want this to go out to students. So sometimes that avenue is not there for us. I'd consider the grad students a sort of unique category because, you know, from my perspective, you know, they may be a grad student and not yet on the tenure track or something, but if they're teaching at University of Oklahoma, they're no different to me in some ways than, you know, whatever professor emeritus is there that, you know, they look like somebody teaching a course and I want to help them and I'm going to get their feedback. I suppose when I go to the dean at some point, it's nicer to have some more associate and assistant professors than a bunch of grad students advocating for the school to make a purchase. But generally those grad student instructors they're great. I mean, for one, I find the grad student instructors are often quite innovative and, you know, have great feedback. So they don't read as students to me on the other hand though. And so I just wanted to build on that a little bit by saying, in terms of conversations, you know, one experience that I've had is there are some schools and instructors and administrators where we go in and in terms of the launch question from Amanda, you know, my preference is that when Rutgers chooses to pilot with Hypothesis, that there's a contract that's signed, and then Veronica and I and anybody else on her team or other instructional designers at other universities work really closely about what that project looks like, involve the faculty and get their feedback, and they get me and my team in front of those faculty talking about the tool, training the tool, providing pedagogical ideas, listening to the ideas and problems that the faculty have, and having a great collaborative team you know, launch of the product. But that happens sometimes, and then other times it's like, you know, and you know, I'm sure some ed tech vendors will do this too, but at sometimes probably because they've been burned by vendors, we'll have schools that are just like, thanks, we'll take it, we're good, you know, we don't really want to continue the conversation, or we don't need your help or want your help. We don't want you talking to our faculty or students. And I understand some of the reasoning there because I'm sure there's some bad actors that have, you know, that aren't as charming as I am and authentic, but that was meant to be a joke, but we're in that situation sometimes where we're kind of cut off. Those are not my favorite pilots, not my favorite partnerships. I understand some of the reason why they happen, but they don't go as well generally.
Deborah asked a question about sort of the ethics of EdTech development, I guess. And especially, the problem, this is from Deborah McLaughlin, sorry. The problem of when EdTech is built in-house at a university and then becomes sort of a tool that university is promoting and using. Are there any ethical considerations for how that's spun up, how that's pushed, and then how it's adopted? Maybe I'll hand that over to Adam first and then see if we can generate any ideas on it.
Yeah, so you called it a problem. I think of it as the exact opposite. I mean, I think that part of what we try to do in higher learning institutions is try to create knowledge and disseminate knowledge. And one way that we can do that is through, creating ventures as well. And so I think that most at least comprehensive research institutions have some sort of intellectual property agreement that they have with faculty about how do you, let your Office of Technology Development know and disclose when you've made technologies, and then how are they there to help assist with growing something as well. I think it's incredibly valuable because as you learn from a lot of education technology literature, a lot of solutions happen to work within very specific communities of learners as well. And so I think building tools for very, specific communities, I think is really helpful on that as well. But I do think it's something that we should be able to promote, is that you do have the ability to take an idea, disclose it to your institution, promote it, and then sort of share it around, whether it is, for a for-profit venture or an open source technology or a non-for-profit, sort of somewhere in between those as well. I think it's something that we can do. Is there ethical considerations? Absolutely. Most institutions also have conflict of interest forms that employees are required to fill out. And I think that you have to look at some point how much time are you spending doing which job. But I'm still very excited to see. I think we're all sort of rethinking what technology should look like, particularly after this last spring, and how do we best serve our own communities. And I think having the universities invented the internet. I think they can invent tools that are on it as well and continue to support it. It doesn't mean we don't need outside vendors by any means, but I think that there's a lot of opportunity to have institutions investing in people who can grow, manage, and support their communities with the tools that they have.
Yeah, and I guess in the one that I use most often, or actually my entire job is based around, is the Domain of One's Own project, which was built out of the University of Mary Washington and is sort of spun off largely as Reclaim Hosting. But it was a internal project that has grown to more than 50 or 60 universities at this point. If I encourage everybody to keep throwing in more questions. I had a few that were based off of some of y'all's earlier conversations. Esther Vanderwalt, in your earlier presentation, asked a question or made a point about wanting to make sure that vendors had a chance to skill up their employees. And I think what she was really saying was that, and Jeremy had made this point in that presentation, was that most of the people working at Hypothesis and then Lisa working with Voicethread actually come from education at some point and have a lot of that experience. But where employees for vendors don't have experience with education, it can be hard to understand what's going on within the university. So is there room in sort of OLC? Is there room in other spaces where we can come together and have those conversations with the employees at vendors so they can better understand our needs and better understand how education works?
I love that idea, John. I don't know that I have a good answer, but I think it's an exciting prospect to think about a conference like OLC really helping to to talk to. I mean, we're doing it in these little sessions that we're doing, but there might be some more formal ways to structure the kinds of listening opportunities that Adam is talking about. I could see a panel of people who are in position to make decisions around EdTech purchasing, or who manage the procurement of EdTech tools, presenting to vendors, and maybe not having something like the EdTech Bill of Rights, but something like that helps guide, so that there's not quite the loosing of the hounds the letting loose of the hounds that can happen in kind of EdTech vending situations where, I'm thinking of hounds running all around behind you on OU's campus there, John. But something more where it's like, this is how it works. These are our expectations, having that clear and upfront, because I feel like, even I feel like walking around the exhibition floor, there's a lot of people pouncing on me, even though I'm, a fellow vendor or whatever. And it also seems a little misdirected or not fully understanding the needs on the other end. I can't remember if it made it into the EdTech Bill of Rights, but there was somebody just saying like, it takes time, right? Procurement takes time, and vendors, especially the salespeople, need to just recognize that. And maybe that just means widening their cadence from once a week of communication to every month or something like that, somewhere in between. But I think that's a really, I think that's a cool idea, John, to maybe more formalize some of the specifics of how these relationships could be better.
Lisa, how do y'all work on that at Voicethread in terms of making sure that your employees and the people that you're working with to develop these products sort of have an understanding of the client needs?
Yeah, so from our sales team, it's small. There's only 2 of us, and then we've got support folks that help manage the student accounts. But I do have to agree with Jeremy on the point that having been in university administration and having managed budgets and procured tools and services and so forth, I feel like I have a really good grasp on the red tape that universities and colleges have to go through, especially state schools, and at times, sometimes more of the private institutions. But it does help me accommodate them. Everybody's calendar and timeline is different, and universities or institutions can surprise you. They can move quickly through a purchase process if they know what they want, they're familiar with the product, they have the buy-in from the faculty that the tool that they're going to purchase is going to be used, or it could take 3 or 4 years, seriously, in some cases. So, everybody's a little bit different. I did like the conversation just a little bit earlier when Jeremy was talking about institutions potentially not wanting students to reach out to the vendors for support. And we do see that as well. Some of our clients would rather us be the second layer of support, that they would field the student questions, whereas their faculty and IT staff, they're welcome to get with us immediately with any questions or concerns that they have for maneuvering around the platform. So,
and that
those are my thoughts.
And going with that, with the support, I think is such a interesting thing too, where universities want to have the EdTech company be the second level of support, because the instructors don't want to be the first level of support.
Correct.
They then go to perhaps, me as an instructional designer or our LMS support. And then we're just being a medium or middleman to that, where it would make so much more sense if we just allowed that closer connection to, so you can go there. I think concerns of that are with having just students only having one place they have to contact, but it still doesn't work, because instructors don't want to be the first point of contact with that.
I will say that the majority of the student concerns, though, are more about following the protocol that the faculty member has asked for. So sometimes it's more about classroom instruction than actually the tool. So
yeah.
I'm sorry to say that we're about out of time here, but thank you everybody for joining us. And I'm sorry if we didn't get to any of the additional questions. Please feel free to reach out to all of the presenters today and follow up more. You can find information about the session on the website. There's also an evaluation there on the website where you can get more information and let us know how it went for you. And thanks everybody for joining us. And thank you especially to the presenters for contributing.
Thank you all. And if you're
Thank you
looking
so
for ways
much.
to extend your OLC experience, we invite you to consider joining us for OLC Accelerate this November. And additionally, the OLC Innovate 2021 call for proposals will be open later this summer. Thanks to John, Adam, Jeremy, Lisa, and Veronica for your time today. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, Tina.
Bye-bye, thanks.